Welcome to What's Your State of Development. We want to try to create a social, therapeutic, educational, learning environment, and hopefully that the information that is shared that it will be utilized as a benefit to you as you go about trying to find your place of belonging. There comes a time in people's life that we go on a quest trying to find our place of belonging. It is essential for us to realize that we do not have to go to the extreme to try to find our place of belonging because we come into this physical world of existence belonging. So we belong. I have with me good brother Dennis Assar Winkler. I like to call him the clinicians of clinicians. And I don't say that without having any reservations about it. We want to try to find out where or what is your state of development. What are you improving upon when it comes to your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and why not financial well being? I will talk a little bit from a book that I have written called You Can Make a Difference. And I will share some things when it comes to borderline personal disorder. Brother Dennis Asagler, he will give a response, a critique, or a commentary on that. By saying this here, some people invest a lot of time hiding their inner weakness by overtly exaggerating their need for self importance. When you feel important, you lose energy to wear and tear of ego dignity so that there is little energy left to do the work. Self importance, not work importance, exhausts immature creatures. It is the self element. And we realize that we continue to work for applause rather than a cause, we sell ourselves short. One more statement: self importance is the greatest enemy. Think about it. What weakens us is feeling offended by the deeds and misdeeds of our fellow men. Our self importance requires that we spend most of our lives offended by someone. And anytime there is an offense, there is a trigger that is in a trap. Brother Dennis Assar Winkler, welcome. Thank you for being a part this particular therapeutic session.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I would start off by saying borderline personality disorder, common symptoms and risk factors. Borderline personality disorder, known as BPD, is a mental illness that affects about 1.6% of adults in the United States alone, according to the National Health Services. It is the most commonly recognized personality disorder and affects a person's thoughts and feelings about themselves and others. What's your take
Which
when it
one?
says is that it is the most commonly recognized personality disorder
Mm,
and affects a person's thoughts and feelings about themselves and others?
well, that's still a lot, but I mean, I'll say I would s- I would go out on the limb to say that that statistic is probably um I mean, it's true to probably those who go for counseling or what have you. I think personality disorders are interesting in and of themselves. I think bipolar. I mean, borderline personality disorder. It's not a thing. It's one of them. I think. I went right back to think, but it's one of those things that is oftenly overlooked and underdiagnosed. And I would probably shoot to say that it's probably even more prevalent in the African American community, which
Mm,
I kind of tend to specialize in focusing on the black population in America.
mm,
So I would say it's probably more pervasive. Um, and if it's not to a clinical level where you can fit that diagnosis as it's you probably have many people have a lot of traits, and traits are just characteristics that one exhibits um, over and over again. It's a pattern of behavior, pattern of way they engage with others. Uh, that is a pattern of that. Well, your personality is a pattern of your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors.
mm. Your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors.
Uh-huh. So,
Mm. There was someone that says that all that we possess is the result of thought. It says that every thought begins with a seed, but the seed must be cultivated. Then you deal with feelings, something out the stove, you feel it burns. And then we talk about a behavior, that which is acted upon. It is says in this book that I'm reading, those who develop BPD tend to begin exhibiting signs by early adult, adulthood, not childhood.
mhm. What I say, have to say to that?
Yes.
I got to read the body language, but I'm looking over here. But
Yeah.
I would say that's probably it. Said it's. I think you can see the symptoms a lot earlier. The behaviors, the patterns, and those things, and of course, it's one of those things that personality is one of that the mental health community doesn't want you diagnosed too early. But typically, one of the main features of borderline personality disorder, order. Pardon me, I'm a little tired today. But borderline personality disorder. One of the main features is the fear of abandonment. Hence, what I'm saying is you don't just become 18 and those things just showing up. You see those things. You see that in people much earlier. The need for affirmation, the need to be in relationships, the fear of abandonment, going from one partner to the next, the over you attach to people very quickly. You know, if you're dealing with BPD, you look at relationships in ways that other people typically don't look at it. You know, you tend to make friends really quickly. You know, you make them like they're like the best thing ever. You will speak to somebody who often falls in that pattern of behaviors,
Mhm.
and speak of them like they have had a long term journey with them. Now, the other thing about BPD that needs to be stated is that it doesn't look the same in everyone. It shows up differently. However, even with that, that main feature of rejection, and typically it's easier to see it in women because BPD is thought to um, be a woman or female disorder. Although, it's just underdiagnosed in men. You know, borderline, I mean, personality disorders in itself, they all kind of, especially when you're talking about cluster B disorders, which were very highly emotional disorders, where you're mostly dysregulated to some degree in
Mhm.
BPD.
Mhm.
Um, or there's features even in narcissism. There's very much similarities, especially when you're talking about a covert narcissist, which is not a clinical definition, but t- it's very difficult to tease out if a person is borderline or narcissistic at times. These are frameworks to kind of help, again, identify thoughts, feelings, and
Behavior.
behaviors. So there's no perfect science, but when you sit down with people, you can identify these things. But let's think of it like this: there was something called passive aggressive or something like that, passive aggressive disorder, sometime in the past. I might have that wrong, but it's no longer in the DSM nonetheless. This is the point
I got you.
I want to make the point. So BPD may be something else in the future. However, that passive aggressive disorder, although it's not in the DSM, it doesn't mean that those behaviors don't exist. What happens is they found out that, well, this disorder might fit better in borderline, or this might fit better in histrionic. This may fit better in uh, um, narcissistic personality disorder. All these disorders I'm talking about right here are cluster B disorders or highly emotional disorders. That grandiosity isn't always prevalent in BPD as you see in narcissism. However, it's there. It just shows up differently. Go ahead.
Now I got you because it sounds like in this global um, pandemic that we have, people call variants,
Mhm.
which means it takes on something different, different strain. Now,
Mhm.
one thing I realized that uh, some things uh, do change over time, and some things go about being undetected. Because things can take on another form. So if things take on another form, it may um, affect people differently, and it may be seen differently. But the principle of it is that those who deal with borderline personality disorder, you would say it deals with their thoughts and their feeling and their behavior. So it sounds like under this that the framework has been set, and you can use that principle of the framework to somewhat identify those who have borderline personality disorder. Is that correct?
Yes, and if I can give you like a criterion here,
Hmm.
it says that BPD is a pervasive pattern of instability, of
Mhm.
interpersonal relationships, self-image,
Yeah.
and present in a variety of contexts. Meaning that it can just be when you meet me. you know,
Mm.
you're mostly. It can't just be me and you having a problem. He's this or he's that. You
Mm.
know what I'm saying? It has to be something that's persistent throughout your life and throughout your relationships.
Yeah, because also because if it's really not identified or caught early on, just it get worse. It gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that too. I said here, as reference to what you said, book uh, about fear of abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
People with BPD tend to have a strong fear of being left alone or abandoned,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of whatever such abandonment is real or imagined. The individual may go to extreme measures to avoid possible separation or rejection. Now, I want you to respond to that because I realize that sometimes we can deal with an imaginary hurt that's not there. And maybe we could be holding on something in the past. And I've learned that when you hold on something in the past, it's really, you're holding that's very emotional. That's just your feelings. And those feelings and those emotions are getting the best of you to a point that it affects your interpersonal skills. And when something affects your interpersonal skills, and therefore you act out on that as it pertains to how he or she will behave. And he or she will go to the extreme to try to get the attention that he or she needs. But getting the attention without accepting the healing, that becomes a problem. What's your take on
Again, that's a whole lot. Now, which part?
that? About going to the extreme,
Mm-hmm.
wanting the attention, but not getting the healing. I'll give an example. There was a artist that could sing real well,
Mm-hmm.
and his wife was worried about him because he
Mm-hmm.
was making money and doing well,
Mm-hmm.
but she knew that he needed medical attention to help him overcome his
So going to the extreme,
yeah
going to the extreme, and what was the other part?
going to the extreme and getting wanting the attention, getting the attention,
Okay.
but not getting the healing that he needs.
Okay. So the tension is definitely a part where I need an insatiable amount of attention. Because lots of times you would it comes from not feeling or not having that attention with your early attachment figure, real or imagined.
Hmm.
Again, but typically there's something there that lots of times when you see in our community, a lot of times we have what we call what do they call them, latchkey children or something like that.
Never heard of that term.
I think I might be saying it right. But that's when a child has the key around their neck and the mother's at work.
Okay.
And so when you go home, you pretty much the mother gives you the chores, she tells you what to do. So alone, and you don't have an attachment figure there. Your mother's doing, your father's doing. Typically, they talk about mothers. They're out on their best, but they're not accounting that this may really cause some emotional uh, issues in the child.
Do you think that? Because I know the psychology for me is that when a child has that once he gets that key, it makes them feel
Like
become
a
more responsible and grown. Do
mhm.
you think that child has given that responsibility? Is there something that could be done too quick or too fast for the child?
Well, if it's too much, like if you, at some point you feel like nobody's there for you. I mean, you might even start looking at other people's parents and saying, start comparing yourself.
I mean, social comparison.
And then another thing that I realized with BPD is lots of times there's some sexual trauma, early childhood sexual trauma. I'm not sure what the research says. I'm kind of in a laid back Florida Day family, so I'm just speaking off the cuff and just in a relaxed manner. But from my clinical experience, there's typically a lot of sexual trauma that aids in BPD.
Mm.
Um,
Now I know when you deal with like they call a word called a sadist.
mhm,
Um, if one takes pleasure in inflicting pain, harm, or injury on someone,
mhm,
and it is associated with something that is sexual. You know what I'm
mhm,
saying? And I think that it also plays out reversibly in individuals who may just outright misuse and abuse people as human beings. You know what I'm saying? And I think that those particular individuals, whoever they may be, are, that there is something that they're not dealing with when it comes to their mental state of being. And in that mental state of being, it carries on others who tend to live and act that out as well. I will go on to say that when it comes to BDP, for example, they may beg, clean, start fights, jealousy, track your loved ones, movement, or even physically block the other person from leaving.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time that I was in a relationship with a good sister, and I didn't want to talk. And what she did was she blocked the door. She didn't let me leave. You know what I'm saying? But that will cause me to act in a certain way because I feel as though I was being blocked in. I can't recall the outcome of that, but I just didn't like for someone trying to block me in when I wanted to leave. So, unfortunately, these behaviors may cause loved ones to withdraw, resulting in exactly what they feared were trying to prevent.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, what do they call it? The prophecy,
For self-fulfilling
self
prophecy.
fulfilling prophecy,
Yeah.
because it becomes too extreme. That person often is said he or she feels like they're walking on eggshell. A person who typically is diagnosed with BPD or has those traits, they're typically they're typically intellectual on one degree, and on another degree they're very emotional. So they typically can manipulate.
Mm.
They typically were very good at giving, starting off a relationship, telling you a lot of stuff about them, and withholding some stuff maybe, but really trying to get a lot of information out of, out of, they'll tell you a lot of things
Mm.
about them, so that you can know about their stuff, um, which also may chase people away. But also then they're giving you something, but there's also some manipulation there because they sometimes want to give out a lot of information so that in return you will tell them the truth. Because a person with BPT has a issue a lots of times with trusting people,
Mm.
and hence they want to know where you are all the time. They want to know if if you show up a few minutes late, it might be blown out of proportion. And one key feature that happens is this concept of splitting. And splitting is when you see people in, black and white terms. Um, you see this person, you idealize them. That's a key feature in borderline personality disorder. You idealize people when they first come. They'll tell you the best. You're my best friend. You're the best therapist. You know what? You treat me like no other people don't treat me. Other people don't get me. You get me. All types of things. But and then they also tell you lots of things that and you kind of feel sorry for them, and you kind of get pulled in into a degree. And then what happens is lots of times when you can't fulfill what some people call that image that they've created in their mind, then they see you as totally bad. Because if there's something they disagree with you on, they typically now discard you. They idealize you, then they start tearing you apart. And typically people with BPD do a lot of studying. They study a lot. They're a little frightened of many relationships. So they study a lot. Like if they go to the doctor, oh no, they're going to study. They're going to go in there lots of times. Not everybody, but lots of people with disorder. They'll know more. They'll at least they'll know more about the subject than the person they're speaking with, because they're gonna. I mean, even if it's a professional, because professionals got so much to kind of remember. Like for example, I'm speaking about BPT. I didn't prepare for this today, but there's so much that I could prepare for. You know, for you, you're not a therapist, but you could be studying this every day. You know what I mean? So you could know it to a greater degree than I know it. You know, so but there again, there's and sometimes what happens is you'll study a thing because you know details don't mean you really know a thing. I'm trying to say, like, it's like you gotta understand how things work contextually and how it how mental health works as a whole. Mental health is a big old spear. For example, borderline personality disorder is a personality disorder. Um, some don't even agree that there's such a thing. So it's lots of things out there, that mental health is so nuanced. But nonetheless, it's this black and white splitting that happens. And it typically keeps people in a lot of conflict in their relationships because the person will never be able to live up to your imagined picture, the snapshot that you took of them as the perfect person.
Yeah, yeah. It says here that BDP tends to be quite needy. You spoke a little bit about that earlier. Intense. You speak about mistrusting not only with romantic partners, but also with friends and family.
And I say, even your doctor, your dentist,
Yeah,
your therapist, all relationships
yeah,
it's pervasive,
mm, yeah.
and those who's closest to you pretty much catch it.
Uh, the book goes on to say, uh, additionally, a person with BPT, BBD, tends to have a very black and white way of thinking about people, seeing them as all good or all bad. We spoke about, you know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? And that's real extreme. That's been very extreme, to the left or to the right. Causes frequently shifting attitudes toward others that range from extreme closeness and love, idealization, as you spoke of, to extreme dislike or anger, devaluation, says
Hmm.
the National Institute of Mental Health. Now,
Hmm.
unstable self image,
Hmm.
unstable self. People with BPD also struggle with identity disturbances. That's an interesting way of putting it. Not identity crisis, but identity disturbances.
Hmm.
Sometimes they may feel good about themselves, but other times they may feel hatred toward who they are. Now, that leads to, you know, what they call, we don't like to say it, that's suicide. You know what I'm saying? Could lead to suicide. Seeing themselves as evil, as evil. Additionally, the self image can change depending on when the person uh, is with, as they offer uh, copy the action and behaviors of others. Copying in the behaviors of others. It sounds like quiet is kept pop culture, where we tend to uh, follow the behaviors of others, and that can be very challenging to be a copycat.
My hypothesis, and it might be some research on it, is that happens because lots of times there's a what I realize is that is a it's a lack of development in the area. Um, person can have a college, all types of money and all types of other things, even a family, but there lies some lack of development from the childhood time. So the way that you see the world is very augmented. It's very distorted. It's very difficult because you tend not to know right from wrong, especially when you're on this what you call vacillate. You
Yeah,
vacillate all the time, and when you're caught in those emotions, you know, it's difficult to tell a person when they're in those emotions that the other person is not their enemy. It's difficult to tell a person when they're in their emotions that what just didn't just happen because they believe it happened. And with those intensive, and then it's because it's kind of difficult because you don't know sometimes what to do. You don't like you need help because it's still like a like in some areas I'm still a child. So I don't know right from wrong all the time either. And the main part of another part that we didn't talk about yet is this desire for pleasure.
Yeah.
And because and I like to uh, make the analogy of this is that it's kind of like sometimes they can even look like adults in front of you. We can look like adults, but when we, as Dr. Naeem Akbar speaks about that little boy or that little girl, or some people call it the inner child, is hurt. So I will act out like that with that inner hurt child. I will act out in that way. I will act out. If you turn your back, I may do some things that you don't think I'll do. I may, so it's sometimes um I need a lot of guidance.
So would you say that um, that plays out of one being very vindictive?
Well, I'm saying,
Because I know that people want the pleasure, but don't want the responsibility that comes with it. For me, but I'm saying that when someone says, "I'll get you," because we can hold and harbor things in, and if you really develop in your emotions, you know, uh, you allow that emotion that you're feeling right now, you allow it to process itself through, process itself out.
I think that that's part of it if you're in the heat of something. But a lot of people with borderline personality disorder on the other end of the spectrum, they can be very emotionally what they call themselves empath lots of times. So they feel other people's pain. Some people question if that's a real fact, or is it just that they emotion. Some people question that. Nonetheless, a lot of empaths or people who call themselves empaths have many traits of BPD, or people with BPT will call themselves empaths, but they're not very empathetic when they're emotionally dysregulated. Let's say that. It's because when you have that much pain, it's really trauma.
Do you do you
You,
do
you,
you
you,
think
you
I- do you think now you're saying, do you think that when you say that the 60s, you say they, when Dr. King did something with the, nonviolent resistance, uh, that they really was genuinely sincere? Did they feel, did those brothers uh, who were sincere really felt the pain, or accepted the pain, or acknowledged the pain of those that would do something to them in that manner? I mean, was these brothers genuinely and sincere? Is because anyone who will accept someone to do something, allow someone to do something physically to them, and to accept that is very challenging within itself, and it takes some discipline not to strike back. And what I'm trying to say is that the sincerity of those particular brothers and sisters at that time, but those who will inflict that, they are the ones are not dealing with their borderline personality disorder to inflict that harm on individuals. Because what I'm trying to say, that there is something that has been inherited on a group of people.
so now you're talking about a group of people.
Yes.
Well, let me finish what I want to finish what I was just saying though. It's hard to see somebody else's pain when you're in so much pain, and that's one of the things. It's difficult to see anybody else's pain because the world you, you become very egocentric again because I haven't developed. Nobody loved me the way I should have been loved, you know. So So, and that's not always true, but that's the vision, that's the perspective, that's the belief system. But as far as, I can't speak on a whole group of people, as far as, and this is a little different than BPD, but if you I can't speak on a whole group of people, but hold on.
Yeah.
um so I can't really speak on a whole group of people, but I will say some probably felt it. um I will say though, people who have a greater mission, a greater cause, and they believe in a belief system that supports that, it could allow them to endure a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And to some degree, it can also, certain belief systems can take people away from pain. It can block off certain levels of pain.
Because I like endurance to this here. The fact or the power of endurance is you be able to endure an unpleasant or even unfriendly or a difficult process or situation without giving in. That's endurance. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Because for example, that a lot of times, even though someone may do you wrong, for example, it's not required upon you to do them wrong.
right.
That's endurance. That's enduring. That's allowing not to give in and to endure and unpleasant. Because sometimes we may not even feel as though that we even want to do something. Sometimes, you
Well,
know what I'm saying?
person, if you want to diagnose a group of people with BPD, um, there w- there wouldn't be. I mean, lots of times there's no ability to control that emotional response.
Mm,
There's a so it takes a lot of a person with quote unquote BPT to um, control their emotional response, because another key feature is, and I'm not saying it's not rightfully so, but I will challenge it a bit. Let me just challenge it. I get it. There's something called being um, trauma informed and really approaching people very carefully. But there's a victim mentality that comes about that's also supported in the belief system. Lots of times I feel like almost everybody's doing something to me because something has happened to me, or I, at least my mind is saying something happened to me and I didn't get the support or the nurturing to kind of combat that per se. It was unaddressed. So there's definitely it's a difficulty not responding. It's difficult to have that level of endurance, especially for some continuous period of time. It's going to take a lot. Hence, people do a lot of things like to cope, which is maladaptive or unhealthy forms of coping. They drink. People would drink. People
mm-hmm.
would take drugs. People, people even, a lot of borderline people cut. Suicide is even an option because it's so much pain. You know, Now one of the things I do try and attempt, if you want to look at it even from a cultural perspective, or even an individual level or community level, there is a lot of victimhood, and I think victimhood is, I understand there is a reason why we um, can see ourselves as victims. However, if we get stuck there and we fall into the belief system that we now cannot tease out when somebody's really doing something to us from when somebody's not, when somebody's not doing anything to us, that becomes a very big issue with someone, or even if you want to diagnose a group of people with post-traumatic slave syndrome. That's what Dr. DeGru calls it. She talks about the belief system is out of whack. So yeah, individuals find it very difficult to know what is real and what is not, especially when it comes to feeling like people are doing negative and bad things to them.
Yeah, yeah. My thing is, my point was that when someone, when something is undetected, when a victim is not dealing with his own uh, hurt or pain, he or she victimizes others. And when you victimize others, that others is taking on that victim's hurt and pain. And reason why I'm saying this in terms of culture, uh, individual, or a people, because if someone would inflict hurt and pain on another, because they don't know how to deal with their hurt and their pain, so they will inflict that on others. And then the pain that is being inflicted on others, they're carrying a double portion of that burden because the other individual or group of people or culture have not dealt with their own pain,
Mhm.
their own victimizations themselves, and it's undetected, and they're not dealing with it. But let's talk a little bit about impulsive, risky behaviors, if we may. Impulsive, risky, often self-destructive behaviors are also common for those with borderline personality disorder. These behaviors can include gambling, spending sprees, shoplifting, or even sabotaging or self-sabotaging success by suddenly quitting a good job or ending a positive relationship. Now, I must admit, laugh, that I have went through that. You know what I'm saying? Willing to, it's like when we're talking about self endurance, uh, not willing to allow the process to take its course. I can remember personally recently, I have no problem with it, that something transpired with an individual, and I said to myself, what role did I factor in? Because I wanted to say, enough is enough. But I figured out what role I factored in. And I said, I'm going to go through this process. So, man, I accept the responsibility of enduring and going through the process. And I want to tell you that it worked out.
Mhm.
And that's a sign of growth and maturity. That's why the 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 this presentation of exchange is, what's your state of development, which means what are you proving upon.
Mhm.
So we have to improve upon overcoming, you know our impulsive risky behavior of self-destructive tendencies, self-sabotaging, and quitting something all of a sudden because we don't want to confront, you know, whatever it is that's going on at that particular moment in that particular time.
Sometimes, I mean, lots of times, the quitting is a way of coping. The quitting though is a means of trying to take some form of control back. Is a means of when I feel like a victim, I don't want to feel like a victim. So I'm going to take control, and before you fire me, I'm going to quit. And many times that leads to you or to one quitting and destroying relationships because they want to have the upper hand. They want to have the upper hand, although probably going to try to go back many times, or try to, or because I can't cope without being in a relationship. If it's a, especially if it's a intimate relationship, I'll go and jump into another one.
Mhm,
Or even if it is a business relationship, I'll go and jump into another one quickly
mhm,
with no questions asked because I have to be in a relationship.
mhm,
I have to be in these relationships. I have to. So what happens is I'll get into another abusive relationship. I don't really, when I first get in these relationships, remember, I idealize. So because I idealize, I jump from one ideal to the next, one to the next, and I can't hardly see the issues or the red flags because I choose to ignore them. And if somebody shows me the red flags, I'm going to think they're hating, and I'm going to probably get a little rowdy with them and things of that nature,
mhm,
because I don't want to see the red flag. I just want to be in a relationship.
mhm. Yeah. And I conclude the primary relationship that one must first establish is with him or herself. Now, what about self harm? It says here that self injury is another. You mentioned that too. Self injury is another common symptom. In fact, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health says that up to 75% of people with borderline personality disorder self injure self injured one or more times, commonly by, as you mentioned, cutting, burning themselves with cigarettes or an overdose.
Mm.
Mm. And that's kind of interesting when you come to what they call the drug, dealing with drugs.
Mm.
So, is a what people call, and not to put any stigmas on them, people or individuals when they call a drug user, they are borderline personality disorder.
What's the question?
Our drug users are borderline personality disorder.
Not all,
Mhm.
but you know, people with borderline personality disorder typically do have some form of addiction, and um, even if it's not, addictions come in so many things, and some of the addictions aren't really in the DSM-5, but sex, overly sexualized many times, overly sexualized, and and insatiable. Like you can't really get enough. It's it's addiction for, I know some people who they just go from one habit to the next, smoking cigars one day. I mean, like they picked up a cigar yesterday and now they're saying I'm addicted to cigars. Now I'm drinking. Now I'm smoking. And it's like they instead of really kicking one, lots of times they go from one addiction to the next addiction. And some of these relationships are addictions from my standpoint. Because you stay in these relationships. And lots of times a person with borderline personality disorder, from my understanding, or at least with the traits, typically hook up with a hardline narcissist because they can be manipulated. They can be manipulated much so because they just want to be in a relationship.
Is it so that um, in the form of addiction is that people are looking for relief from some strong
Pain.
and yeah, intense emotional pain?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's pain. It's pain like nobody can imagine when you're dealing with borderline personality disorder. It's the pain is excruciating. And of course people have different very levels. But when you're talking about someone who's hard line and really severe, and borderline personality disorder is a very severe disorder. You feel like nobody else can feel. You feel things that are there and you feel things that aren't there.
Is it so that that pain that an individual feels, he or she may feel as though that no one is can feel or understand what they feel,
So
and they feel all alone and they become isolated.
that's that's part of the reality, and that's also a part of the mindset. See, the mindset tells the person that, and that supports the disorder from my standpoint, because they really believe nobody cares for them, but people do care for them. They just don't. Many times they can't take the blame, or they can't really admit to why the relationships are a struggle and failures, because as you stated when you first started off, those symptoms actually bring about what they're afraid of. And even when and they're trying lots of times, but when you're in it, and from my experience, when a person is in the relationship, they can't they can tell that they're doing things, but when they really trying to work on it, sometimes they think they're right when they're not right. So it's hard to tell when those symptoms are kicking in, because you just believe you're right.
Yeah, I recall one time in a situation of disturbances. in the in a living arrangement,
Mm-hmm.
whereas that it got so intense that the best thing for me to do was to leave that
Mm-hmm.
that particular environment and just walk it off.
Mm-hmm.
Because it says even about those the brothers in the civil rights days that they, as James Bevel would say, they didn't really know what they do was a means to let off their frustration. So you can remove yourself from those intense situations.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one instance where I thought I was going to lose it, and I just allowed whatever it is that was going on in my mind. I wasn't resisting whatever was going on in my mind. I was just allowing it to process. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And that served as a benefit, for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know if people can come to a point, or individuals can come to a point, where that they, if it's the pain is so intense, and the emotional pain is so intense that they are able to deal with it, where they, may say, well, let's uh, take some deep breaths, deep breaths, deep breaths, deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
We hear that, but when it hits you at that time, you're going to be tested. So the challenge is, how do we get to a point? And if we can get to a point, or is it on the individual? Because remember, you said it's in what their mind is telling them. What their mind is telling them. How can uh, one change their that mindset or that thinking when it comes to that this is this pain, this emotional pain that I'm dealing with. I need relief. I need something outside of myself.
They have to learn that that pain is transient. It's short lived. But when most of us who have pain, and not even to that level of pain that they have, and the reason why the pain again is so excruciating is that your attachment figure, the theory is, which has a lot of research to back it, is that the attachment figure helps you learn to regulate your emotions. So if you feel like your parent was, and this is when you're a very young child, you cry for your mother and she's not there. So now I'm just crying. Nobody to help coddle me, to help me regulate my emotion. Or somebody's there too much and just coddling me all the time. Or they're inconsistent, which is lots of times you see in BPD, what they call it, I forgot what it's called now off the top of my head. It's more what's the word? But it's inconsistent. Let me just say that. Whereas it's so inconsistent, and lots of times people with BPD, they've actually been abused by their caregivers. So if I've been abused by my caregiver, this same person who loves me also is hurting me. So I feel, or it's happening. So what it becomes, what do they call the term? Nonetheless, you just it's very confusing.
Well, also you also sound like intense mood swings too as well. Said mood swings tend to pass fairly quickly, typically lasting only a few minutes, or hours.
Yeah, but it goes up and down because
Goes
you
to
can go
that
from
vessel. Yeah,
extreme highs and
yeah,
extreme lows.
yeah.
But it's not like bipolar disorder where a person will stay high for a long time, 7 days, 5 days, 3 days on a high.
Yeah, because I've concluded that I said that seconds lead to minutes, minutes leads to hours, and hours leads to days, and days lead to weeks, and so forth and so on. So you gotta let it go. Intense mood swings again. It says chronic feelings of emptiness, feelings of inadequacy. I call it a learning disability that we get to a point in our life where we feel as though, are we good enough? And yes, you are good enough. Feelings of inadequacy and deep feelings of insecurity, I think, seem to uh, um, be prevalent amongst people who participate in acts of violence.
Well, one thing I realized though, a lot of was one of the struggles with BPD. If you have a moral compass,
Mm,
lots of times, and I say again, if you have one, because lots of people don't have one, they're just like, what is that?
yeah,
But if you have one, many times your reality is inconsistent with it.
Mm,
So that hurts you as well because the image that you see of yourself doesn't necessarily match your behaviors.
mm.
And sometimes it's difficult to go there because I don't know how to regulate my emotions. So it's difficult for people to really show that aspect of myself to myself. I don't want to see that part of me.
What about those three words? I heard your thoughts, your feelings, and behavior. Now you use the word moral compass. It doesn't match the reality. The reason why I'm using the word match. So is it requirement that one feelings match the other feelings in a relationship? One thoughts match the other person's thoughts in a relationship, and one's behavior match the others in a relationship?
I don't know about match, but at least be complementary.
Yeah, because it match is that which will equate to, it will produce a result. But yeah, yeah, it's good stuff, man.
You
Yeah,
thought you'd only want to pay attention to words.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Yeah, we're gonna try to bring it to a close. This has been very informative. Hopefully, very. We want to try to do our best to create a social, therapeutic, educational, learning environment, and hope that we gave you the information. And if we use the word resources, um, that,
And yeah,
and what else you want to say? Too?
no, it's one of the words that I was talking about is ambivalent. Like I'm earlier, I was looking like so you in a state of ambivalence. You know, do I proceed? Do I go? Do I retract? Do I so I can't. So it's like a very disoriented reality. Like I don't know if I can trust people. I want love, but I don't trust people to love
Mm,
because my caregivers kind of started me. It kind of that's kind of how it's been for my life. If my caregivers didn't take care of me, if my caregivers didn't take care of me, how is somebody? How can I expect somebody else to?
mm, interesting. Um,
That's the mindset. Part of the mindset.
yes, and that takes on a level of, as you said, as a child, a level of dependency.
Mm.
Yeah.
And another one. Hold up, we gotta say this one. Another thing is people. I think you may have said it. When somebody's dealing with BPD, they often think that they're the problem, although they might not say it.
Mm,
See the question, and so it becomes difficult to know when you're the problem, when you're not the problem. And damn, I don't want to be the problem all the time. But so I act like I'm not the problem, although deep inside I feel like I'm the problem. I'm not good enough.
yes.
You know,
Feelings of inadequacy.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not good enough. I fuck up every excuse my language.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just fuck up everything.
Yes.
But I'll blame it on you. But inside, I'm really blaming on you so hard because when you say the littlest thing like I made a mistake,
Hmm.
it supports this is what you call what inadequacy, what
Yeah. Feelings of
feelings
inadequacy.
feelings of inadequacy.
Yeah.
So it supports these deep
Feelings of and insecurity. Yeah. Yeah.
inside, yeah,
Yeah.
it supports this that I'm not good enough.
Mm. And that is that's very dangerous. Um.
Although the only person said was I disagree.
Yeah. Yeah.
you
When
know,
when they feel as though that it supports that, those
mm.
feelings of inadequacy and deep seated feelings of insecurity, and people will act out. And I say people will act out very violently.
But
Yeah.
you asked a question. I know you're about to wrap it up, but I would like to at least answer that question. Um, I think some things that help that's been very effective for BPD
Yeah.
is a modality called DBT,
Mm.
dialectical behavioral therapy.
That's the behavior.
And
Yeah.
one of the reasons why that's been kind of successful, or pretty successful, is that it it allows a person to see the gray, another side of their reality or the other person's perspective, or because you can't mind.
Mm.
And the problem is we're so sensitive when we're dealing with DBT. I'm sorry, BPD,
DBT. Yeah.
is that we believe everything is out to hurt us when it's not. Not maybe not everything, but too many things are hurting us when it's not even intended to hurt us. So hence, I have to now learn to look at things from another perspective, at least challenge those things. And also the dialect is that people can be late and not be losers, or people can be late and still love you.
Yes, sir.
People can be, people can say no to you and
Yes, sir.
still care for you.
Yes, sir.
All that type of thing. Because in the person's mind, DBT, I mean, with BPT, BPD, I'm sorry, y'all, is that they many times believe that any of those things, you say no to me, you can't make it, you can't do this person doesn't care for me, they don't love me, I knew they was a fraud, I was waiting for them, so all that type of thing happens.
Well, let's look at that in my book again, dialectical therapy. I mean, my book, You Can Make a Difference, the human restoration
Why
process.
you take so long to get a title though, bro?
Yes, yes. I wasn't trying to be,
Narcissistic.
yeah.
That's not narcissistic. You gotta give the
That's a
people
good one.
you
Yeah,
gotta give your
sorry.
people
Got
the
me.
book, man.
Yeah, but let's deal with what we're gonna talk. It says since you brought it says acceptance and change.
Uh huh.
Um, acceptance, mindfulness. We speak about that. I heard you speak about that.
Mhm.
Mindfulness,
Mhm.
being aware of the present moment without judgment,
Mhm.
because that also leads to being judgment focused. That's an
Mhm.
automatic distorted thought when you view in others and events in terms of evaluation, good or bad, superior and inferior.
Yeah. I Another thing like mindfulness is being in the present, right? And being in the present allows you to really deal with what's happening right now and what's happening right now. All that other stuff that you're making up,
Yeah,
I'm dealing with this right now. What's really going on?
no question.
And then the other thing is, a lot of times people with BPD speak in hyperboles or hyperbolic thoughts, where they just make. That's another thing. I help people identify that. Try not to speak um in hyperboles.
Mm,
Not this. They say it's the worst. It was the worst. It was the.
that's it.
This is my day is shitty. My whole day is
And the
shitty.
day is not even over. But yeah,
Yeah, like it's like, and because then you really examine it, and they were like, oh, I don't really mean that, but no, the reality is when you start saying that, it brings down your mood. It leads you to, so you got, get them to really challenge. Oh, she's the worst.
yeah,
They say the worst, it's always the extreme. you
yeah,
know
right.
a
And that's
person could have cut them off. That bitch, she didn't care. She's a race. Like they go straight to the extreme.
yeah. I remember I said one time when something had transpired with me, and I said, well, I'm discounting them all, but I said it's not them, but it's that's in them. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the change, the acceptance and the change, mindfulness, the change is emotional regulation. Understanding and reducing vulnerability to emotions, changing your emotions,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the acceptance, distress tolerance, managing a crisis without, worsening the situation,
Mm-hmm.
accepting the reality as
Mm-hmm.
it is, as you
Mm-hmm.
stated, and the change is interpersonal effectiveness, getting needs met, maintaining relationships, becoming self-respect in relationships. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, this has been a very helpful and healthy, and I want to thank you, for Brother Dennis, for coming on and being a part of this session here. I done changed it so many times, session to from this and from that. You
It's
know.
just a kickback,
Yeah.
because we kicking back today,
Yeah.
and I apologize. I'm going to apologize publicly, because I am a little tired today. But we having a chat. Me and Brother K. We roll like that.
Sure enough.
So
Sure enough.
you can research everything we said, um, and if there's any questions, you can always drop a line at the bottom of this uh, video, um, and we will do our best to get back to you. Kevin's the researcher; he has a whole book on it. Make sure you get his book. Um,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, you can make a difference. It's the human restoration process. You can make a difference. So yes, thank you for that. So any closing remarks, brother?
I'll just say thank you for having me.
Hmm.
This nice facility here is TNet Holistic Wellness Center.
That's right.
You can find us. We have a beautiful wellness center here. This is an actual office in our wellness center, um, where we offer counseling services, life coaching services. Downstairs, we offer all types of products, herbs and nutritional products, and we offer a lot for people. We offer for all people, but we specialize in Black people.
Mm.
So our address here is 5525 Harford Road, Baltimore, Maryland 21239. Our phone number is 410-777-5020. I'd like to say just thank you, Brother Kevin, for bringing me on. And like to just leave with the listening audience. I think we all can grow in the area of challenging what is actually factually true. I think that we can all strengthen the because we lots of times in society, especially when we're dealing with anxiety or anxieties, especially in this time of COVID and all, things seem to be true, but as they often say in the Christian church, it's often false evidence appearing real, which keeps us deluded, unstable, unbalanced. But to get that equilibrium back, as Brother Kevin said, mindfulness, being present, and actually having the ability to challenge what is real and what is unreal. Peace.
All right. What's your state of development? Until next time, talk to you.